All right, good evening. Let's call the meeting to order. It is Tuesday, April the 9th. We're here at City Hall for our regular first of the monthly meeting, and we stand for a moment of silence, followed by the pledge of allegiance. Thank you.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Adrian, let the record reflect that we have, that everyone is here.
Minus one. No Linda.
Sorry.
No, it's me.
Last one. All right, we have our agenda, and I think it's just for those in attendance, we'll do like we've been doing. We'll go through the agenda. There won't be a public recognition. You'll just have an opportunity, if you have a question as we move through, just sort of be recognized and ask your question. All right, number one.
Okay. Number one is a replat request for 512 Highway 98, Unit B. This was previously 3 townhomes, all destroyed. The owner in the middle, I believe, is in the middle, does not want to rebuild, so they want to sell their lot to the 2 owners on either side. The staff recommendation is approval of the replat due to the fact that the request meets the requirements of the Land Development Code and reduces density in low-density residential. And the Planning and Zoning also voted, I think unanimously, to approve that request.
Okay. Are there questions or comments from the table or from anyone here that has anything to do with this request for replat? Chair will entertain a motion.
I have one comment. As a condition of your approval, I would require that a recordable form of this plat is provided before any construction proceeds, just so we get properly documented public records. I don't think we have anything like that yet.
I think we have that already.
Okay.
I think they provided that, but we'll verify.
Excuse me, just
So we're approving a replat, and we don't actually have that document in front of us. That would be the document that would get recorded in public records that shows
I'm with
the 3 lots.
Okay, okay. I think we've always done it. All right, but go ahead.
Motion to approve the replat of the property on Highway 98, 520, and to include the proper form site for the place.
Have a motion?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Questions? Again, anyone? Okay, is there any opposition? Let the record reflect, motion passes 4-0. All right, continue on, please.
Okay, the next one is 508 Oleander. This is a single lot. Prior to the storm, it had a duplex. A different owner owned each side. They wish to split the lot so that they can now have 2 equal lots and build individual structures. I think this has come before the council before, this same lot. And staff recommendation is while there would be no change in overall density, since 2 dwelling units would remain 2 dwelling units, the new lot size would not meet density requirements for a single dwelling unit in general residential zoning. Planning and zoning voted unanimously to not approve this one.
Okay, questions or comments?
They will be removing.
At least one of them will be rebuilding. The other one is still.
And what's their options? What are their options if just to put back what they had?
We would have to put back a duplex on a single lot.
Simple.
Probably, to do that carefully, they probably structured as a condominium with 2 units.
Well, what's the downside of, under these conditions, other than it just makes it non-conforming?
Well, it doesn't meet density requirements. The lot wouldn't be large enough for one dwelling unit.
And you probably have no setbacks, right?
Correct. It's a 0.172 acre.
Well, we're gonna have a city full of them on the south side of the road, like Clear Road, for example. They're not gonna be density.
The same ones we've had before. I mean, they're not gonna be any different than they were before.
I understand, but they're also non-conforming.
Correct. But this one is conforming, going to non-conforming. I mean, it's a difficult situation because one doesn't wanna build back, one does, it's a single lot, so it is a conundrum.
Anything you would recommend?
Well, I think that approving something that you know is gonna expand or add to the non-conforming uses in the city, I would generally have to recommend against. We've got a planning board recommendation against approval. But it is unique because it sounds like there was a building there previously that would be similar to what would be there in the future, and it is an unusual situation.
That's why I think for me, I think there's reason to consider. There's no different in that than many lots in this city when we granted everyone can build back in their footprint. The only difference here is that you know you're creating a non-conforming structure by the size of the lot. But again, given the circumstances, it's sort of quirky.
Well, planning and zoning was 5-0 against it, so.
Well, they don't make the decision, they just make a recommendation.
Well, if we're gonna have planning and zoning, then we need to pay attention to what they say.
Could
Because
this,
most of the time, they look into things a little deeper than we do.
Well, I hope not.
could this lead to, I mean, kind of, if we approve this, I mean, on my street, I've got a duplex that was there, and they would like to build 2 separate units on it. I don't know, I can't remember the lot size, but I think it possibly could create, if we do it for this, that it could create a lot more situations like this, because there were a lot of duplexes in this town on lots.
Okay. Chair will entertain a motion.
I move that we accept planning and zoning's recommendation.
Second. Have a motion and a second to accept planning and zoning recommendation. Any further comments or questions from the call roll?
Mr. McLaughlin?
No.
Mayor Kathy?
No.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Putnam?
Yes. Everyone knows that doesn't pass. So, is there another motion? Okay, I'll relinquish the chair. I don't know who the mayor pro tem is without one, but somebody can handle that. And I'm gonna make a motion that we allow that parcel to be split. Who is the mayor pro tem in this situation? Protocol. We don't have one.
I don't think you need to
No,
relinquish
these are
the
the
chair to
oldest.
make the motion.
Hmm?
I don't think you need to relinquish the chair to make the
Yeah, you do.
motion.
You do. I'm not sure who would be the mayor pro tem with
Well, the
this
oldest.
situation.
I'll just withdraw that. I'll withdraw that.
I agree.
Yeah.
I don't know who that would be.
I'll withdraw that.
The ugliest.
Yeah, ugliest, that's me.
Okay, so nothing changes. Moving on. Ordinance, no,
Got it.
project status updates.
Okay. So, next slide, so we're just gonna give you a quick update, on the projects for phase one and a couple of phase two and three. But I first wanna talk to you about what we're doing with funding. There's a FEMA pilot program, 428, the mayor went to the meeting and heard about this. So any of our projects, what 428, the beauty of 428 is it allows you to submit, get approval, and then get your money as you're working through the project instead of spending your money up front and waiting on reimbursement. So almost every project that we have where there's a damage and mitigation, it's limited to damage and mitigation for future storms, we're gonna push through 428 so that we don't have to spend that money up front and wait for reimbursement. We can take draws on that money as we go through. So, a lot of these will fall in that category. The pier is probably one that we will not, in the government complex, we may not, because we're increasing and doing something different, so we're still looking at those. But just to give you that heads up, that we're looking at using anything and everything we can through the 428 pilot program to help with our cash outlay. So water and sewer repairs, these are the response projects, the things that are ongoing until they're complete, so let me give you an update on those. The ground storage tank repairs, it was awarded, we're working on the notice to proceed, and those repairs will be complete 60 days from the notice to proceed. And before I move on, I wanna say something. All of these are soft targets. This is the target we're going after. We have a lot of unforeseen things. There's a lot we don't know as we get out there. So we have soft targets. Typically without problems, we'll meet those targets. And I'll talk about dredging in just a few minutes. So the water tie-ins, that will be awarded on the 6th. That's gonna be the 18th now. We changed that to the 18th. And with a completion target of June 1st on the water tie-ins, that completes the water to the rest of the remaining condos. And one thing I wanna mention.
And excuse me, is that south side? Is that when you
Those
say
are the condos.
just the condos, not the south side?
Some of them are south side, so 37th Street, 38th Street as well, yeah.
Okay.
It's a combination.
And one thing that I wanna point out, if you remember the water project many minutes ago, not everyone was put over on the new lines. As we are doing repairs and installing the new meters, we're gonna be migrating those folks to the new line. The cost is less than putting them back on the old line, so I just wanted to give you that heads up. Anyone who's still on the old line, as we go out and put in the new meters and do those repairs, they'll be on the new distribution system. Okay, the next one, the water plant repairs, that's supposed to be awarded today. You guys will award that today with a completion target of September 5th. The 8th Street Bridge utility relocates, that was awarded. The completion date on that one is 6/12. Phase one of the sewer repairs, this is Miramar to 24th Street South Side. Is that just south side, Dina? On Miramar to 24th.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was awarded, and the target completion date is June 12th on that one. Sewer repairs, phase two is 24th to 386, that will be advertised on the 12th. We'll go out for bid, and we're targeting that completion, with August 12th. Master lift station repairs, it will be awarded today with a target completion of September 5th. Stormwater system damage, we completed the damage assessment. FEMA is scheduled to inspect the system on 16th of April. And then once we have that inspection, then we'll be preparing an RFP and putting that one out. Miscellaneous, the public work yard fence, we awarded that already. Philip is working on a contract with the vendor, and that will be complete 60 days from the notice to proceed. Vehicles and equipment, we've submitted all of our claims and they've all been paid, with the exception of a few we're challenging. And we're working through the replacement of all that, all the equipment. So Public Works they've replaced a couple of mowers, you guys have approved those purchases, and some weed eaters and a push camera. So what they're doing currently is they're looking at all of the equipment we had prior to the storm, determining what do we need to replace, or what should we purchase differently. Once we have those decisions, then we'll bring that back to the council to get your approval on purchasing the remaining equipment. Debris removal. We still have small debris that needs to be collected along the waterways and the storm ditches, and we're working with Kaiser Kane Storm on scheduling that. Hydro seeding, part of that project is to complete hydro seeding of all the storm ditches and the bank, so that we can reduce the sediment going back into those areas. We have a price from Kaiser Kane. We're currently looking at pricing on existing DOT contracts to see if we can reduce that cost some. So we will be bringing that task order back to you guys once we know which route we're going. Debris removal on private property. We began the code enforcement process last Monday for homes that either need to be demolished or where we have lots of debris. We made it to 34th Street, from Canal to 34th Street. We identified 25 properties that fall under that nuisance category. Of those 25, only 2 had not already applied for the right of entry, so that was really good news. So 23, they're already on the list for either demo or debris removal, and the 2 are not. You guys saw the letter that I sent out that's going to go out with that citation, because what we want to do is we don't really want to cite anyone, we just want to encourage them to apply for the right of entry and allow us to help them through the FEMA public assistance to get it cleaned up. And then FEMA did give us the approval to begin demolition. We got a price yesterday from Kaiser Kane. We have 8 homes. They approved 19 in the first round. Only 8 of those were still standing. The homeowners had taken care of the remaining. So of those 8, we'll start that work. We're preparing a task order, and we'll get that before you guys as soon as we can. They've inspected another 32, I believe, and we're still waiting on approval on demolition for those. Okay. Any questions on code enforcement?
Got a question, Tanya. On the demolition that have been approved, 12.5% the city pays, correct? Because FEMA only pays so much. Is that 12.5% going to be charged to the property owners? As a taxpayer, I do not want my money paying for somebody who did not have insurance, and you're paying to clean their lot, take their house down. That 12.5% should go on their property tax bill. The city is hurting for enough money as it is right now.
That's a council decision, so I'll defer to the council to respond to that.
Anybody got any comments to that? Okay. Are you through? I mean, is that the end?
No, I'm gonna keep it. Okay, restoring the marina, we completed the damage assessment and we scheduled the FEMA, we requested the FEMA inspection. I don't think it's been scheduled, but they'll come out and inspect the damages. The boat slips, we're hoping to get that awarded by May the 7th with a completion of 9/1. Salt Creek Bridge, that will be awarded today with a targeted completion of August 1st. The pavilion and restrooms, both at the canal area and at the boat ramp, we're preparing a task order. We signed a contract with DAG finally, and we are preparing the task order to begin that work. And they've asked us to do one task order for both restrooms and pavilion at each end. Just makes it a lot simpler since they're gonna use the same design at both areas. The dune walkovers and paths.
I have a question. What is your proposal for those of us who do business out of the canal? September is totally out of the question. You're putting me out of business. Because I committed to come back after the storm to Mexico Beach to conduct my business. And there's 4 or 5 of us that have city business licenses that operate our businesses in the canal. Now, what is the plan for those of us who operate businesses, charter businesses, to be able to function? I mean, when we were redoing the canal slips next to the Welcome Center, some of us parked over by the linear wall. We cannot, I mean, as far as a business owner, what am I supposed to do? I mean, having canal open from the boat ramp to the mouth so boats can launch and go is great. But as a business owner, there has to be something that we can do so that we don't all lose our businesses.
So here's what I can say to that. City's not putting you out of business. Hurricane Michael created a situation. We are working as quickly and as hard and as fast as we can humanly possibly work. But what we can tell you right now is it's not just the canal restoration like before. We've got dredging underway. That's gonna be going on for a while. We've got the boat ramp area we're using as a laydown yard for work and projects that are underway. So we're gonna do it as quickly as we can, and and I think you and I have spoken before, if there's any way that we can open up some of those slips, we'll be happy to do that. But right now, I can't commit past what we have.
Well, I'd like further comment. There seems to be a perception that we can only do one thing at a time. There's no reason why we can't be repairing slips while they're dredging. They don't get, no, I'm talking about just putting planks down. I'm talking about electrical. I'm talking about water. That can be going on right now while we're dredging. But yet, we're not even going to address that until May the 7th.
We are doing a lot of work in parallel. Most everything we're doing is in parallel with other work. The slips, we had to complete a damage assessment first to understand what the damage was on the canal. Then FEMA has to come out and inspect that damage and approve the work. And we were gonna award it by May 7th, which is about 3 weeks away.
Let me ask you, without shore power, there's places people can power boats up there.
We do have piles that are missing, some, and that's what I was saying there. Once we understand what we're dealing with, it's awarded, we can talk to the contractor, we will make available slips if we can. But I can't commit to that until we know what
But the
we're doing.
vertical wall, that'd be available. I mean, would it not?
On the north-south run?
Mm-hmm.
It's possible, but we gotta understand too that the road's gone, all that's gonna have to be repaired, parking spots are gone, that's gonna have to be repaired. I agree with Tanya, until we know and can talk with with the contractor, I think it's too early to say, this is exactly what we can do.
I mean, I understand the work side of it. I think in previous meetings, for me, I was thinking that we were gonna have some slips available before that day.
For the September date.
Yeah.
And we may, and we want to do that. I just can't commit, I can't tell you, you can bring your boat in a slip on June 1. I can't tell you that today.
But I can bring my boat in the canal once, because the private side is available.
Once we open the canal back. Mhm. Yeah,
Well, don't we plan to open that up from the boat ramp out?
of course.
Yes.
Okay. So once it's navigable from the boat ramp out, people that have boats that aren't trailer boats can find ways to hook up, or can find a way to tie off, is my point. Is
Yeah,
that-
yeah, we can't.
I would say sure, as long as it's not on the city side, right now.
Okay, when will that be, when will that be that we can make that assessment?
We're gonna award it by May 7th, then we'll have to talk to the contractor and see what we're looking at. We've also gotta look at, as Philip said, the Salt Creek issue, getting the bridge back in there. So there's just a lot of moving parts along the canal right now, but we are committed to getting you back in as quickly as we can.
When do we expect to have the canal completely dredged so we can start?
Let me go ahead and touch on that. You guys, you know, we had a soft target of April first, and we just ran into so much buried debris in the bottom of the canal. So then we had to stop, bring the debris contractors back in to remove that debris. So we had quite a bit of downtime waiting on that, you know, to get that debris out of there. The plan was to start working 24/7, and then the rain hit last week. And then we're still dealing with the weather situation this week. So we will be going back to 24/7 as soon as we can. We have about 200 feet left from the ramp to the second sandbar.
Well, we did before the weather turned. We probably got closer to 400 feet now,
With
with all the sand moving back in.
How's that work on our contract?
There, we allow for weather days, and then after that, we're paying $750 a day in penalties for missing that day.
Well, really, I should have asked you a different way. We dredge, and then we get weather, and then what they dredge, it closes up. Do they go back and dredge it again?
Essentially, yes, sir, that's exactly what we're gonna do until we punch through it, and then once we punch through it, the plan is to move our dredge up and then keep it maintained.
Are they gonna charge it extra since weather has hit?
They'll
We
charge
have to
for every yard
dredge,
they pull out.
whether they've done there once or not.
So our dredge pumps where? Where
Our
would
dredge?
our dredge discharge?
Straight down to the beach.
Is there an updated, opening projection for the canal?
I was asked that probably 17 times over the last 48 hours. If I had to put a timestamp on it, I'd say it'd be another month before we can punch through it. Just looking at weather reports and extended weather forecasts, I mean, it doesn't look like it's gonna lay down. no
Pumps
time
through
soon.
the second sample?
Yes, sir.
Snap season opens June the 11th, you know, shoot us in the foot.
Well, I don't think we wanna shoot them in the foot.
No.
Okay, I mean, I wanna be clear, nobody wants to shoot anybody in the foot, but there is, Mother Nature is, in the business you're in, and the business that we find ourselves trying to get that facility back open, we definitely have to be able to assess it properly and deal with it in a way that when we do open it up, that we don't just cause more problems. So, and that part I do understand. I guess I didn't think that we would find that much debris after we'd already been through there. Because I am aware of that. I know that we are finding several, but we'd already been through there, so I guess my thoughts were, they got most of it, but obviously that's not.
There was so much buried, and the debris, we couldn't remove the sediment, we could just remove the debris. That's part of dredging, and so then that's when we found the big stuff there.
Philip, are they gonna stay at the mouth? Are they gonna leave that alone and come back?
No, we discussed that, yesterday. The issue with if we were to leave the mouth and go into the interior of the canal and discharge that sediment into our spoil site, the site that we have now, that's good sand, that's beach compatible sand that we can use on the beach.
Mhm.
If we use that spoil from around the bridge or north of the bridge, we can no longer use that sediment on the beach. So the plan is to hang out where we're at now, continue to work in the area we are now, which is go ahead and open it up to what the final parameter is gonna be. And the second it lays down, we'll be right there to move back out into the mouth. And if it lays down, which I don't think it will, to go to 24-hour days, but if we can get 8 to 10 hour days in every day, we can have it open, in 5 days, is what they say. So, that's what we're planning for.
Well, during the weather, we're not producing, no, we're just sitting tight.
No, sir, we're working further back into the canal, into the interior of the canal, and just go ahead, we're making that bringing it to the final parameters, so we don't have to come back later on. So we're working on that, but we're staying close enough to the mouth that if it lays down, we can pop out there and shoot out there real quick.
Okay.
All
Okay, moving on.
The dune walkovers, the first 5 walkovers will be awarded, again, that's the 18th, we couldn't have the meeting on the 16th. And then we begin our beach restoration, the emergency berms will be awarded again, that's the 18th as well, we moved that date. And to be completed, we're probably looking at 180 days, in talking to the company. Different companies will be bidding on that, we're looking at about 180 days for completion of those emergency berms, because we can't work at night after dark in turtle season, we can work during the day but not at night. But we'll have quite a bit done, before, I would say within 90 days, we were talking this morning. So what we're finding, we've already started doing this, some of the sand that we're pulling out is good quality sand, we're already placing that along that emergency burn area. We have a lot of sand, good quality beach sand that we're dredging that we can use. We're waiting on permit from the Corps. Final checkpoint, we reached out on that again this morning, so that we can start getting that good sand out of the spoil pit, as Philip mentioned earlier, and get that down on the berms. So, a lot of money and sand sitting there that we can use.
And I did have an update, I heard, so it was in FWC's hands to go back through and make sure that we were okay per our biological opinion. They have signed off, we had to submit a request for additional information, FWC's reviewed it, and the last I heard was they were fine with what we submitted. They're going to send it back to Army Corps to then issue the permit, so they are saying within the next few days. So as soon as we hear that it's gone back to Army Corps, we'll be following up with them to talk about issuing that permit.
And that's to put that sand into the bins. Okay, sea oats and dune fencing, we have a big volunteer project on June 1, so if you're listening and you wanna help your beach and your city, June 1, we're gonna have an all-day volunteer project, that's Saturday. Duke Energy employees are coming out and working with us, and we're gonna be replanting sea oats and putting in dune fencing along the beach. So mark that on your calendars. If you know anyone who wants to come down and help out, that would be a great project to help us with. The sand bypass system, FEMA's inspecting that this week. Once they do their damage assessment, then we'll do our damage assessment and look at what we need to do with that. Beach parking, along the dedicated beach, we have a conceptual layout that's complete. We're coordinating with DOT currently on that work.
May I ask a question on that? Right now, I know we have cones in place as DOT is working. I do see several people parking. Are you still allowed to park on that side, or is that a no parking and we just don't have signs up yet?
They should not be parking on that side during road construction.
See them out there.
It's a little treacherous.
Yes, I agree.
Their car may end up down on the beach, so I would say you should not be parking along the beach.
There's lots of parking out there.
And will it be okay if they park on the other side on the city park?
I don't see an issue with the other side. We can't really put signs down there because the signs aren't gonna stay there,
I understand.
but we definitely need people, and we'll put that on Facebook and.
Okay.
and like-
They are,
Well, that should be part of DOT's MOT, so you contact them and let them know that this is what's going on.
definitely on the weekends I see, and it kind of bothers me because, yes, it's easy for a car to go.
Mhm.
Excuse me, Tanya, what is the conceptual layout? What does that look like?
It's just basically, well, Dean, I'll let you speak to it.
That is to show the additional footage that we're trying to pick up from DOT's right of way to fit in angled parking instead of the parallel parking on the beach side. And then to designate with curb stops where to park. I mean, before you could just pull up and park anywhere, but we're trying to maximize the space and have it organized and then do some landscaping.
Is there gonna be like different areas along the road?
Yes, and only along the dedicated beach, but yes, it'll be broken up with areas where you can park and then areas of no parking.
And we'll be, once we have the completion of the dune walkovers and we work with DOT on that, we have a better idea, we'll be sharing that in a public meeting to get input on that. Just a couple more things, the government complex, we did complete the wetland delineation, and we've shared that with St. Joe. We had kind of a a rectangle area after looking at the wetlands, and we need uplands. It's more of a triangle-shaped piece of property. We provided that information to St. Joe, and they're looking at it. DAG, we've handed the wetland delineation information off to DAG, and they'll be looking at the site layout.
Tanya, I just got a quick question on wetlands delineation. I used to do some of that work. How did they determine those wetlands? What method did they use?
So far, it's hard to get in there for access, and the vegetation's been so disturbed by the storm. What we did was an aerial delineation and then a site visit to confirm it, so looking at aerials for water
What set
and
of standards
vegetation.
did y'all use? I know there's maybe a half dozen.
We have to use both the Army Corps and DEP standard for delineating wetlands. DEP requires that we look for a certain type of soil, standing water, and specific vegetation species out there. So right now, it's more of a desktop delineation based on aerials and then a site visit. Once we have actual confirmation from St. Joe, we'll go back out and do a very extensive on-site.
It's not falling back on St. Joe then to do this delineation themselves through their consultants.
No, we've done that for the city, Dewberry.
Are they gonna accept that?
Yes, we have to follow the state standard and Army Corps standard. Then when we apply for permits, the state and the Army Corps will come and verify our wetland and make changes to it if they don't agree, and that will be what we have to follow.
Is there gonna be any mitigation process?
Likely, based on the amount of wetlands, likely that the project will require mitigation, because I think we're talking about 20 acres. So, yes, I believe there will be mitigations required as part of that project.
And then the last slide, we've already talked about the dates. I'll just jump to the bottom, just to give you financials. So far, for debris removal, we've submitted 7.2 million. We've received 3.6, a little over 3.6. The remaining 3.6 we're expecting very soon. We also, the second one is our first 2.7 that we received. Category B, emergency protective measures, we have over 2 million. We've received 1 million of that through the expedited process, and we are expecting the other half of that also very soon. Roads and bridges, this is the 36,000 that we submitted for the engineering work on Salt Creek Bridge, and we've already received that reimbursement for that work. And then on the right side, it just gives you some additional information on what we've been doing. We were the first to receive any FEMA reimbursement from Michael. We have a little over 7 million, almost 8 million that we've received so far. Our donated resources, this is a big one, and this doesn't include Team Rubicon, all the work that Team Rubicon completed in our city, but we have about 1.6 million so far in donated resources, which is a lot. And then we were the first to complete our SDEs. The final date, if you need to appeal an SDE, your last date on a case-by-case basis is June 1. After June 1, we won't be able to help you. So if you're even thinking that you still have a unique situation working with your insurance company, just know June 1 is that last date that we can help you. Let's see, we were recognized nationally for our flood ordinance and our rebuilding efforts. That was very cool. And then we're the first to receive FEMA approval to demolish structures for Hurricane Michael. And then those are just some, we're gonna continue being very aggressive with our reimbursements. We'll put the slideshow on the website just like we did last month, so that everyone has it available. If there are no questions, that's all I have on the update.
Did we put which is a little weak, like you mentioned the website, did we put the question and answers that went out with the bills
I think
on the
that,
website?
yes.
Okay.
And we're not just sending them out in the bill, we're sending them out to any
The one that was.
previous
Yeah.
utility customers as well, to try to get it to everyone.
Before we leave that back on the canal just a second, the harbor master position, is that on your list?
I've got it on miscellaneous.
Never mind, moving on. Okay, any questions from anyone on the report, staff report? All right, continue.
Okay, the next one is ordinance 718. We talked, this kind of was spearheaded by, Killer Seafood wanting to use a storage container for a temporary, food truck, if you will. So Nick has taken, a shot at drafting what you may wanna do. Just a couple of items, that I wanted to bring to your attention. So for RVs on vacant lots, the council agreed initially that, within 30 days of the moratorium being lifted, that owners, if you wanted to keep your RV on your lot, you had to at least start your development order. You don't have to have plans yet, you just need to go in and start your development order and let us know that you're gonna rebuild. We've kind of been lenient, and we haven't been out there harassing folks, about that. We're way past that 30-day window. So I'm just kind of giving you a heads up that we are gonna start looking at that and asking people, if you've got your RV on your lot, we need to see an intention that you're gonna rebuild. And that's keeping with what the council adopted in the ordinance, if there are any concerns about that.
No, I think we need to look at it the same way we have of lots that have problems, be very nice going into it. Because there's some people probably just don't realize where they are.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think we need to rethink that. When we passed this ordinance, when I supported this, even though I didn't vote for it, I thought there would be a bigger push on people pulling permits or attempting to get their lives back together. I think that again, suppresses the ability of people to get work done. I wouldn't think 6 months after this storm that we would now go tell somebody, you gotta leave because you hadn't pulled the building permit. I think that time should be expanded.
Should we at least though go out and, again, a nice letter reminding them that it was there before we do anything, censure and tell them to go, and ask them to come in and see if we can capture a significant number of those that may be in that situation before we push?
I mean, we can do anything. I just think that that's not, I just don't agree that we should, because they have not pulled a building permit or submitted. I mean, just drive around town, there's not a lot of activity. And there's not gonna be a lot of activity because they can't get things lined up. A development order doesn't last but for so long. There's no people here just to get on somebody's list is gonna take months.
Mayor, if I could suggest, so why don't we do this? Why don't we hold off? And we'll just get a count. We'll figure out, because we've got documented everyone who pulled a permit. We'll see how many people haven't pulled permits, and then we'll have a better idea of what we're talking about and bring you guys back that information so then you can make a decision on what you wanna do.
We haven't been pushing them yet, so.
I mean,
Yeah, I can agree with the mayor, that a lot of people are still dealing with insurance companies and haven't decided whether they're gonna build or sell or whatever. Some people have, but, I can't see any point of rushing anybody at this point in time.
So why don't we just sit tight, bring you guys back some numbers so you'll know, talk to people, see what issues they're facing, and then we'll bring that back to you guys at the next meeting.
And just for clarification, a couple of edits that relate to RVs on here, they don't actually change the rules, they just restate the dates so they're less confusing, not tied to the expiration of a moratorium and put a solid date on it.
But that doesn't mean people shouldn't clean up their lots.
Correct.
And it doesn't mean, and FEMA is going to be looking at more demolition, did you say? And more houses? population is growing, and the only way to stop that is to clean things up. And so, we're also going to expect people to clean up their property that maybe their house has been moved or destroyed, and they've cut trees, and we're expecting those to be cleaned up and be mowable. Because, you know, there's several that haven't done anything, and the grass and weeds are starting to grow, so.
With what you said about rats, because I was talking to one of our citizens the other day, and they told out a meeting, shot 2 of them while I'm standing there, which may not be good, but that does go to the points you're talking. Is there any kind of a FEMA program that would help us to keep that population down or go after the rats in a situation like
We
this?
can certainly check. I don't know of anything
I'd rather
else.
get, we've been very preemptive on a lot of things, moving forward. I don't wanna get a bad rat population really before we can start doing something.
Yeah, I mean, this is the first I'm hearing about the rat population. No one's
I
called
have
us
heard a
here.
couple of times, but I
You
honestly
weren't here,
was,
we talked about it last meeting.
Yeah, the last meeting you guys
Yeah.
talked about, yeah.
I didn't expect them in the yard I was standing in, and yet they were there.
I'll check with FEMA and see if there's anything. And some of the things, I mean, I'm having this issue finding somebody to come do my yard and do my trees. Hard to find someone. So, a lot of people are all in the same boat.
I have a question about cleanup. If you have a right of entry, can we volunteer to clean up their property?
Of course.
Because I'm really sick of it.
Yeah, of course. We just need to make sure we capture those hours. Yeah. We have a right of entry from the owner, we can do that.
Okay.
Okay?
On, ordinance 718, then, even though we just talked about that, there's also quite a bit of language in here on the food truck.
Right, and that's really what prompted the change, Mayor. So if you look on page 4, section C. Nick, I'm gonna let you, if you don't mind, speak to that since those are your.
There's actually an important change in section 3A too. The original rule was designed to last on commercial facilities, food trucks, modular buildings. The original rules were designed to last for 1 year from the effective date of this ordinance, which I think was December 11th. What we've done here is extended that to 2 years from that original effective date. That was the city administrator's suggestion. And then paragraph C is new, which is designed to allow you to approve other types of temporary facilities that are not strictly a food truck or a modular building. And it would require someone to make a written application with a commercial development order, application form, showing what they want to put in, diagrams, drawings, site plan, and it would come to you, and if you decided that it was at least as safe and looked at least as good as what you would get approved under your other paragraphs here, which is the food trucks and the modular buildings, at that point you could approve it.
Well, given that it's all in one ordinance, and we're gonna look at, would it just be appropriate to table that for right now? First of all, this isn't coming back to us from Killer.
I haven't
It-
talked to Mike.
I have, he
Changed his
said
mind.
he's not gonna do that.
Okay.
So
there's
I don't see any real reason to
rush it.
try to accommodate that until we decide how we wanna deal with the whole order, being it's all in there.
Right, I agree.
So I think, something, if everyone's agreed, we'll just table that and move on.
Okay, it makes sense to address the RV portion, if we're going to change it at the same time.
Same time.
We're already beyond the date
Right.
when it was set to expire.
Okay.
And you guys are okay with extending the food trucks for a year?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're moving as fast.
Right, okay. Okay.
Okay.
So, the next one is the floodplain ordinance. So, once we, worked on our floodplain ordinance, adopted it, the state has a FEMA consultant that they hire who, reviews every floodplain ordinance in the state and provides recommendations. So Dean and I worked with her for 2 or 3 meetings. And she just incorporated it, cleaned it up, made some little tweaks. Nick has reviewed it as well. And that's what you have before you today. There are no changes essentially to what we did. You just have the, just some added language that makes the state and FEMA feel more comfortable with what we're doing. But I wanted to just point out 2 things in the ordinance. There is a comment in there about, lots that are zoned AO. We don't have any AOs in the city currently, but by putting that in there, then if the FEMA maps come out and there are some AO zones, they'll already be addressed. So that was one recommendation. So when you see that in there, just know what it's.
About midway through in the technical amendments and building code, that's where we address increased elevations. The same approach that we took on the other categories, we just didn't address AO originally because we don't have AO.
And then the other point I want to make is, before we specifically reference the preliminary, Northwest Water preliminary maps, she helped us add additional language so that when those FEMA firm maps are published, then our ordinance will refer to those firm maps. And as always, I want to remind you that the maps we worked with initially were best available. So when those firm maps come out, you may see some changes. That's not new news, but I just wanted to make sure we pointed that out. So basically, this is just a restructuring. We added, we pretty much put all this in, and we're gonna be incorporating the floodplain ordinance into the land development regulations, so folks only have to go to one place instead of multiple places to find what they need. And I think, Nick, you added the language there that supports incorporation into the land development regulations.
Yeah, actually what we've done is, at FEMA's recommendation, deleted our floodplain, or this ordinance would delete the floodplain rules in the federal ordinance, chapter 152, and then move those rules with some changes into our land development regulations. That's why you see the numbering change in there, because it's a different format for land development regulations. Some of the other things in here that look like new language, some of them are actually prior items that occurred in ordinance, I think it was 636, and they just didn't get codified. The folks that we contract out to do the online codification, just a few of those items didn't make it in. So the primary changes on here, aside from moving rules to land development regulations, are the freeboarding on the AOs that Ms. Castro described, and then relying on a slightly different map, with the real result being that when we did ordinance 712 on February 5th, we tried to lock in an exact map on an exact day, so we were sure of what those heights were going forward. This would instead rely on a map that has some potential to change over time as better data comes in, but it's also the map that people can easily get to when they look online. The map we tried to refer to on ordinance 712 would be pretty difficult for anybody to find.
And that map, the firm maps are not available yet, but just when they do become available, they'll.
Okay. So we need to adopt, or need to read this for a first reading, ordinance 719 today. And that's what recommendation.
Yes.
Okay, Chair will entertain a motion.
So we'll move that we would read for first reading ordinance 719.
Have a motion second. Any opposition to reading? Mr. Welly?
Ordinance 719, an ordinance of Mexico Beach, Florida, amending the Mexico Beach Code to repeal Chapter 152 floodplain requirements and Ordinance 712 regarding floodplain and building requirements. amending the Mexico Beach Land Development Regulations to adopt a new section 4.05.00 floodplain requirements containing an amended version of the rules previously provided by Chapter 152 of the Mexico Beach Code, to amend procedures and criteria for development in flood hazard areas and for other purposes, including relying on the post-Michael adapted preliminary flood map for Bay County instead of FEMA's draft best available data map as it existed on the effective date of ordinance 712. To restate and readopt previously adopted technical amendments to the Florida Building Code and the floodplain chapter of the Land Development Code, to amend such technical amendments to the Florida Building Code to eliminate reliance on the draft best available date map, relocating unshaded X zone requirement to build 12 inches above crown of road to section 4.06.02 of the Land Development Code, providing for applicability, repealer, severability, and effectivity.
Okay. All right, moving on.
The next one is the stormwater ordinance discussion. When we started looking at, we have implemented a process where, when we first receive a development order, we review it for stormwater, we make sure, upfront that the city knows what we have to do with stormwater. If it's a new lot, we don't have stormwater facilities, so it just allows us upfront to address it versus later on the back end as we were doing it in the past. And so we started looking at our stormwater ordinance, and we found that there was an ordinance codified, and then there was stormwater rules and regulations in our land development in our land development code. So we basically married the two and added a few changes. So I'm gonna let Dina walk through this. We went through it with P&Z last Monday night.
Right, I can just go through them. Some of it is the same, and a lot of the changes were actually to bring our LDR referenced the outdated Florida Administrative Code, so we have tried to rectify that, to reference the new code, and then rely on the state standard in Northwest Florida, rather than trying to explain how to design stormwater systems, we're referencing state standards. So the intent 4.0601 is almost exactly the same as it previously was in the LDR. Under general requirements 4.0602, that is a little bit new. The purpose of that is to provide an option for a homeowner if your runoff goes onto an adjacent property owner before it reaches a city stormwater structure such as the street or a ditch or an inlet or a pipe, you're going to be required to get an easement and essentially permission from the property owner that you're sending your stormwater to. P&Z did have, or not P&Z, discussions with Tanya, we actually had something that we considered adding to that. It's not in here yet. We had planned to bring this before you again. And that would be if it's a residential property that's installing gutters and downspouts, and those gutters and downspouts are directly connected to a stormwater structure. So if you take your downspout all the way out to the ditch and discharge there, or to a city pipe, then we would exempt that residential development from this first portion of section 8, because essentially you're getting the stormwater from your lot directly to the city collection system, so you're not surface draining it. So that's something we may revise and bring back. On item B, this is where we changed the LDR to match current administrative code, and we're differentiating between, previously it was vague in our LDR as far as residential development being exempt from stormwater quality and attenuation. The state exempts that, so this would basically refer to the state code saying if you're an exempt activity, which is typically residential activity, is the state code is 9,000 square feet of building space combined with 4,000 square feet of driving or parking space, you would be exempt from any attenuation or water quality. So we're just kind of using that state requirement on B. Water quality under 4.0603, again, we had a partial state reference in our LDR, but it wasn't the full state requirement and it was outdated. So this would just take, if you're required to do stormwater management, either for water quality or water quantity, we're referring back to the state requirement for how you do that. Under water quantity, if you're required to do stormwater management, like if you exceed those thresholds of 9,000 and 4,000 square feet, you would per our previous LDR requirement, he would be required to attenuate runoff to the 25-year, 24-hour event. That hasn't changed, but we're pulling out exempt activity from that requirement.
Tina, the exemption for residential, if you build one house on a previously platted lot, I'm sure it applies, but for a bigger residential activity, multiple homes or townhouses, do you know how that applies?
Yeah, it comes down to that square footage. So the state code is if you exceed 9,000 square feet of building space in combination with 4,000 square feet of driving and parking, so you can combine those two, then you trip state threshold and you will have to do stormwater attenuation. So we're using that requirement. So it's not so much the use, it's those,
The size.
yeah.
I might ask, where do we stand with the NPDS permitting for the stormwater system here?
The city doesn't do that. The city references, that is part of this, references that you need to implement best management practices, but that is governed by the state. The state issues those permits. So moving down to 4.0603 item C. This was in the LDR previously, and we're stating that again. If you trip thresholds and have to do a stormwater management facility, then it needs to be certified by a registered professional engineer and include your calculations as part of your submittal. P&Z suggested that we also, previously, item C, underwater quantity, had additional language regarding off-site runoff onto your property. So P&Z suggested that we take that out of the LDR and keep it in here. I can read that to you, or we could wait until the next time we present it. But essentially, that language stated, if you have off-site runoff coming onto your property and you're able to get it around your stormwater management facility, you don't have to catch it or attenuate it or treat it, but you have to let it keep proceeding as it was, so you're not blocking any off-site flow. Item D is actually kind of relates to that NPDS. Portion of this was already in our LDR that essentially it's saying if you're going to do any sort of development, grading, filling, excavation, you need to implement erosion and sediment control, which is a state requirement. But we added a line here that says for some developments, an erosion and sediment plan may be required. So that gives the city, for certain developments, if you're next to, even though the state is governing that and issuing your NPDS permit, if you are next to, let's say, a wetland area that's a sensitive area, then the city can also ask to see what your erosion control plan is. So it's just allowing us to ask for that for certain developments that may need it. Item E is the same as previously was in the LDR, and this is essentially saying that in Mexico Beach, we prefer that you use ditches rather than closed system pipes where possible. Because of our flat grades, that works better, that system works better here. F is a new item. This was already approved under our comprehensive plan changes that is requiring if you're in a non-flood zone, that your finished floor be 12 inches above the crown of the road or the curb. P&Z did suggest that we rewrite that to match exactly what's in the comp plan, because I guess we changed it. It just wasn't word for word, so that was their suggestion. Item G was in the previous LDR. H was in the LDR, but we've kind of clarified it. This is more for bigger projects, so if you have a multi-phase project like possibly St. Joe, this item would say that if you're doing it in different phases and you're not doing a regional detention, then you need to implement stormwater management for each phase that you're developing. If you're gonna do a big project and you are gonna have a regional detention that addresses all those phases, it needs to be installed first, so that stormwater management is in place before development happens.
Could I ask a question? Could we turn the air conditioning on there? It's hot.
I didn't know that was my responsibility. But wherever the switch is,
I'm sorry, Ben, but I noticed a couple people were about to pass out in there.
Thank you, Jerry.
There's one in each hall.
oh, somebody get it, or Jerry's get it.
I'll get it.
Right there.
Bring back the-
Where you at?
Your office is gonna be cold.
I'm sorry.
My vents are closed.
And violations is the same. However, P and Z suggested that we add a description of penalty for violation and describe how it's enforced. I think that's probably already in the LDR for other sections, but that was their suggestion.
Thank you, Dina. So I just wanna, say a couple things. First of all, thank you, Lance, for letting us pick your brain quite a bit on the stormwater plan. We appreciate that. So far doing this, it hasn't held up any development orders. We're looking at it, we're working with the owner on the front end. The only one that we've been struggling with is one that was approved a couple of months ago before the storm that we're trying to, again, go back on the back end and resolve it. So, this process is working well for us. We're catching stuff on the front end, working through it with the owner, so there are no surprises for either the city or the owner, or the bordering neighbors on the back end. So we're not asking you guys to do anything today, but just give us your feedback, and then we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting for a first reading.
Dina, a residential lot is exempt from stormwater. Commercial lots are not.
It depends on the size.
On the
So
size,
that 9.
Based on those numbers, there's not a lot in Mexico Beach that you can build that on.
The
mean, not a
9 and
single
4,
lot.
yeah, probably not.
No.
Yeah.
That exists today. So on a residential lot, back to, 4.06.02,
Mhm.
A. Is this new language?
Part of it is new, but the gist of it was in the LDR. Essentially, you need to grade your lot and get water to drain off your lot towards a city drainage structure.
And I fully understand that. The part that bothers me is that if you can't do that, you're gonna get a permanent easement from who?
Right, so if you're gonna send your stormwater, what we're suggesting is if you're gonna send your stormwater runoff directly onto someone else's property that's not the city, then you would be required to get an easement from that property owner that allows you to do that.
Well, how does that, I can think of one particular street, the gentleman came in and did a lot of fill on a lot, and all of a sudden the water is going to the next street over. How does this affect that? It's already in place.
Well, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, and that's why we're working through this, and we're reviewing those on the front end, because in the past, there's some issues like that now we're dealing with. We're trying to help owners resolve it. We've got, issues with, the neighbors getting the runoff. We actually have 2 right now that we're working on.
Also, that particular street doesn't, I don't think, have anything set up, ditches or anything that I'm thinking of for the city, so.
Right, and so if there, currently, if we don't have stormwater facilities there, they've just gotta get it to the street. But those are the ones we're working through, and then that gives us on the front end, we can look at it before the home is built and figure out if there's something the city can do. But we'll be addressing stormwater deficiencies in our, the stormwater, damage assessment, the work we're doing currently.
When you said it goes to the next street over, if the water's flowing to
It
the street and
it
it continues
runs
to
to the
flow.
back of the lot, which then
Right.
takes it to the lots on a street that does have.
And that's the scenario that's being suggested where they would be requiring an easement from that property to back.
And the purpose of it is to protect not only the property that's getting this, if you were to send your runoff to someone else's property, it's not just to protect that property owner that would now have runoff coming onto them. But let's say it's a vacant lot that you're sending your runoff to, and then they come and develop that lot, and now your runoff is blocked, then the person that developed first that was sending the runoff that direction, that's all gonna come back on their property. It's not gonna continue to drain. So that's the purpose of the easement, is so that even as lots get developed around you, you have an easement in place that allows you to continue to send your stormwater where you originally intended to have it go. And I think some of the ones we're looking at, you would do that easement within the setback of the lot. So it wouldn't be buildable area to begin with. It would be within the setback, and you would have a conveyance through.
And use me as an example. year and a half, I've been on the city to try to put a drainage pipe from where my house is to the corner. There's none within 3 houses. And I put a swale in, and the guy behind me and I have a submersible bilge pump that I have to pump water off the property that goes between my house and the next house, because it has nowhere to go. It can't possibly go anywhere. There's nothing there. So I'm pumping it across the street right now to an empty lot. So I'm in violation of what you're saying right now. And it's a pretty simple fix. It's just a ditch witch with a pipe in the ground, and it's fixed. I mean, we're
Actually,
this
not
every time
that,
it rains.
it's actually not that simple, but we are working on that, and we have a stormwater master plan that we're tweaking after the storm, and we're identifying all those areas. Colorado, we know is a big issue.
Well, yeah, I mean, the 4 lots right where I am, catty corner all together, if a swell went right between them to New Mexico, there's 2 drains at that guy's house right there. So that would drain 4 lots right there. It's a pretty simple fix. But instead, we have submersible bilge pumps running every time it rains.
Well, here, I have a question on the downspouts. Does that have to be closed conduit flow to a city drainage area, or can it be a sock pipe or some sort of exfiltration?
We just started discussing
Yeah.
that, so we really aren't that far with
Okay.
it. So we welcome your feedback, though, if you have some suggestions.
And we have discussed
Oh, you
that
guys talked
option,
about it,
yeah.
Okay.
But just so we're clear, we're not asking folks to provide us some expensive stormwater plan. We're just asking them on residential lots, when you come before us, let us sit down and look at it, let's make sure that, you know, we're protecting not only that owner and making sure we can take care of the stormwater, but also the surrounding neighbors.
Is it fair to say, I think often people will be reluctant to grant easements to their neighbors when they're not sure what's going on. Really, what the end result of these rules would be is to force people during construction to find a way to push the water to the streets.
To the cities, right away, exactly. But there are some limited places where that just isn't possible due to topography. And because the city, so far, I mean, we're unique in that we don't have a lot of big subdivisions that are planned out and the stormwater collection system is put in place before it's developed. We have a lot of areas of town that are a patchwork of single-family lots that get developed over time without a centralized collection system. So there's 2 parts to it. It's changing the rule to direct development so that, yeah, it goes to city right-of-way. But then the second part is the city installing infrastructure in a collection system that then can get it from the right-of-way where it needs to go. But if you're not draining to the right-of-way, if you're not requiring that, then putting in a bunch of expensive infrastructure for stormwater collection isn't gonna help.
Well, then, let me ask this question so I don't come across as some negative. In this letter, it says, you can't build a lot in a flood hazard area without mitigating the field. That sentence, without mitigating the field on a residential lot, how would a person do that?
Well, first of all, this is in our floodplain ordinance, you guys already approved that, so this isn't new.
We approved it, my thinking, when we approved it, wasn't dealing with an already set up city where you have streets that one house on that street, depending on the elevation, can affect everyone's floodplain all the way down the street. I never thought that we would be keeping up with what loads of dirt were coming into this city to fill up a lot. Now, I was told that now that there's a development order process to do this. But I'm asking, how would Frank Smith mitigate a residential lot?
Depend on how he's gonna lay out his site. I mean, you bring in, now, we allow a certain, first of all, this is not new, you've always had to have a development order to develop a lot, whether you're
Not for
taking down
field,
the
though.
trees,
Not for
you're
field.
taking down trees, if you're filling, if you're doing any development on that lot, in the LDR, that's a development order. But,
Well, I disagree with it. I don't think that's a development order to take down a tree.
I didn't
We've never
say
done-
to take down a tree, but if you're clear cutting a lot and you're filling, that's a development order. It always has been.
That's
When,
part of the development order for the construction.
it's a development order if you're just, I mean, we had lots of discussion many years ago about that, and it's a developed lot. Once you.
I'm asking, how would Frank Smith mitigate an issue if he has a low lot? How's he gonna mitigate that? Well, I'm just trying to understand, what are we expecting of him to do?
Well, we're expecting him to make sure that he doesn't fill his lot and push that water to his bordering neighbors. So if he wants to come in and bring in fill and raise that lot, then he's gotta figure out how he's gonna contour that lot to take fill out in other areas. He wants to raise where his home is, and he's gotta figure out how to take the dirt out in other areas to remove that so that he's not filling that lot and pushing that water to his bordering neighbors. And it's gonna be based on lot. And so far, the only issue we've had with this is we have one prior to the storm that came in, clear cut the lot and filled it. And without any type of permit or development order. And now the city is having to deal with, all the bordering neighbors are now suffering from that stormwater that's building up on this empty lot because the natural drainage is now gone. Because the owner came in and blocked the natural drainage with all fill. So we're just trying to work through situations to protect the bordering neighbors, to make sure people understand what they can and cannot do up front. And,
Well, to me, we've gotta do something. I'm 7th Street. I watched years ago that some gentleman came in who owned like 4 lots, 5 lots maybe. And didn't get anything, request anything from the city. In fact, it was kind of good for water flow because at the back of the lot, there was kind of a little creek that actually, or ditch area at the back of the lots that took it into our drainage. This guy came in and built the lots up, filled it, and actually had the lots leveling back to the back of his lots. And I can think of 4 properties right now that water flows through. One of them directly across from me, he's been very adamant for years because you get a good rain and he's got 3 feet of water in the back of his lot, which he didn't have before. So I don't know how, I hear what you're saying, but, you know, that's not fair for the neighbors.
My concern is simply that when you have Maryland, Georgia, I pick any street, you've already got so much development in that area. And you're gonna pick a lot in the middle of those streets and everyone else's property, their houses are built, their foundations are down, their elevation, you can't change those elevations of those houses. So you're gonna take a lot that is undeveloped in the middle of a developed community / street, and we're gonna say, you have to mitigate, you hadn't built yet, everybody else has. I have concerns that we're gonna charge, I assume we're gonna charge somebody a development order fee to put dirt on their lot.
that's a minor development order. I mean, that's not a change, Mayor. I mean, you say it is, but it is not. If it's always been a development order if you're gonna clear cut a lot and backfill, and keep in mind.
I'm asking if somebody wants to put dirt on their lot, did we not have an instance just a few days ago where somebody put a load of dirt in and we stopped them? Did I misunderstand that? Don't know anything about that? Okay.
I know.
But if
about
somebody
the
wants to put dirt on their lot, they can't do it without a development order.
They wanna fill their lot and start developing that lot, they can't do it.
Not
If they
development.
just wanna put dirt and raise it, yes, absolutely, they need a development order. Because you just gave a perfect example of why we're doing this, because the bordering neighbors, this one person comes in, raises his lot 3 feet, whatever he decides he wants to do, then the bordering neighbors get that runoff. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that we're doing our due diligence as a city and not allowing people to come in and alter the land and change lots and affect bordering neighbors. If you are in a flood hazard area, with the exception of X, I believe, you have to go through the Loma process if you're gonna fill in a floodplain. That's in addition to what we're doing.
That's, I know, it's in addition to,
So the guy comes in and, I mean, I'm just curious, if we don't, someone comes in and builds that lot up, the water runs off a neighbor's yard, who do they go to?
The city.
Well, but we
And,
don't
and
have
the
any-
reason I go to the city is because I'm just aware of like 7 or 8 loads of dirt was delivered in the last week to this particular area in town. They have no permit. No permit.
And
And they're dumping dirt, they've got a dozer out there, and they didn't talk to anybody about it. Well, unless, I mean, once things are done for a year or two later, and that's one thing we're living with now. In the past, we haven't been as strict as we needed to be because we're just a little country community. But now, certain people moving in here expect us to have city ideas. Well, at least more.
I guess what I'm saying though is if we don't do something and they put the dirt in and it dumps water on other neighbors, can they really go to the city and expect the city to do something if we don't have something in place that says they should?
That's my point exactly that I made. When I built my lot up, I came to you guys and said, hey, I'm putting a swale in, but where's the water gonna go? I don't wanna flood my neighbor's yards, I wanna be the good neighbor. I don't wanna piss off the neighbors. We're dealing with it, and there's nowhere for it to go because the city doesn't have a pipe there. They don't have a drainage swale, they have nothing. And that causes the problem. So all you're saying here is, if you're gonna dump dirt in, make a swale around your property so it drains to the city right away, but then it's up to you guys to take care of it.
But it puts it on the city though to take care of it.
That's how it should be.
Or
That's
if you
what we
don't
make
do
that.
that's how it
anything-
should be. That's
Yeah.
exactly how it should
But if
be,
we-
and she said it, you can't say it any better. If you don't have the right infrastructure in place to handle where the water goes, we just gonna sort of lay it on the homeowner to fix his own, and I think I'm just more interested in looking at a bigger picture for stormwater than picking out a postage stamp lot on Georgia.
But the postage stamp lot is, and I'm arguing with you just because.
Well, you don't need to, I'm not arguing.
But I know, not arguing, I'm sorry, discussing with you, I'm not arguing. But if we don't do something on that postage stamp lot, doesn't that also torque all the neighbors around it, even though it's one lot? You know? Do we have a responsibility?
I guess where I'm going is that we seem to permit our people here beyond what I consider reasonable. If we were just gonna help them and go out there and look at it, I'm okay with that. But we're gonna get, I guess we're gonna charge them for a development order, we're gonna charge them for a permit, we're gonna charge them, and I've just sort of reached the point of, when I read this, I thought of, well, here we go again. We're gonna,
But if they don't come in for a permit, we don't know they're doing anything.
well, I don't know of anything that anybody can do in here with this city without permit.
Well, I just mentioned one a while ago.
Well, they did it, they're doing it. I mean, I don't know where you're making a reference to. Is it they're just cleaning a lot up?
No, there's a house there.
So they do have a permit
No, they didn't.
to build a house?
No, the house is not, it's been there for years. I counted on my front porch as they go by,
Okay.
6 or 7 dump truckloads of dirt. And when I asked the city had no permit. Well, all we're asking is, give us a permit so we know what you're doing, so we can kind of either help you or say, no, you're destroying the whole neighborhood.
Okay.
The city's got to have something to say about what's going on.
And I'm not necessarily in favor of making money on permits. I would like to cover the cost of the employee's time, the city's time.
Well,
But,
no,
I don't
In
think
this
it has to be
case,
assessing.
it's, somebody here in this building needs to know that these people are gonna be dumping so much dirt. And nobody knew. But nobody knew when they put up their wood fence either. They didn't get a permit then. Well, I'm gonna redo my fence, well, I'm gonna come up here and get a permit. And what are they gonna do? Well, they're gonna come by after I get my fence up and look at it, so that looks good, and they're gone. But I didn't make it 10 feet tall, within what the permit says I can do. So it's a little communication both ways. I mean, the city can't run around watching people every minute of what they're doing, especially in these times. And so that's not too much to ask. I made a comment 2 or 3 meetings ago, you have to have a permit to do anything in Mexico Beach. Well, it may cost you some money, and it may not cost you some money, but it's a way of us being aware of what's going on, the way for this guy here to know what's going on, you know, and well, maybe I need to go check on something there, or somebody else in the staff. Doesn't mean we're going to go by and slap somebody crazy because they're doing something wrong, but we're just gonna communicate with them to make sure we're all on the same page. I don't think that's asking too much of anybody.
If I could just interject on the permitting issue, the only additional permit that we've added since I came on board October 1 is the RV permits for the folks who are putting it on their lots after the storm. We haven't added any additional permits, we're just enforcing what's already on the books. And if you guys, if it's a rule that doesn't make sense, then change it. But I'm enforcing it unless you tell me you wanna change it and it's a bad rule.
Problem is sometimes we enforce and sometimes we don't. We're not consistent.
Is there any other comments, Commissioner?
I got a question.
Yeah.
Okay, Michael messed up my yard pretty good, like most of y'all's probably. I'm gonna need to put a couple of loads of dirt, level it off, and put sod on it. I need a permit for the dirt and then a permit for the sod. Cause it's building it up by 1.5 inches.
If you are bringing in, and Dean and I talked about this, if you were bringing in dirt to level holes and, I mean, you can even bring in sufficient fill to level for a site if you're building a house. We're talking about folks that are bringing in load after load after load, raising
Well,
lots,
I
3
understand
feet.
that,
But
Where do you
his
start
point
your
is,
road?
does he need to have a permit because he's dumping dirt on the lot?
I-
And my answer to that is, I think you need to have a permit, just so the city can come by and say, oh, yeah, that's fine. You know, because I know you personally, and I know you're not going to make your lot look worse, it's gonna even
I'm
be
trying to make it
better.
look better.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. But, it's just a matter of communication. And I don't even know if is there a charge for that? Is there a permit?
They shouldn't be.
For, if you're actually gonna develop a vacant lot.
No,
you
no,
can
no,
develop it.
he's doing
Without
his
one,
house.
no, we
I wouldn't think there'd be a charge for that,
No.
you know,
My dog appreciate it.
well,
All right, any other? Moving on.
I'd like to provide one comment.
Okay.
While everyone was discussing, I was looking at what we already had done on this mitigation fill thing, the idea where you're supposed to, if you're putting in fill, you're supposed to dig a hole. So in ordinance 712, which is the one that's already adopted for floodplains, we had a statement in it. At the time, we weren't sure what to do with this. What it said was, the city council directs staff to research rules and procedures to require mitigation for development impacts, including fill, to the 100-year floodplain and bring recommendations to the city council for consideration to be included in the city code or land development code. So we didn't really adopt rules at the time, it's more what we're doing now. We're talking about what to do. What we have in the floodplain ordinance that you just did a first reading on, what FEMA added, they did add one section that relates to this, but it's only for flood hazard areas landward of the coastal construction control line, so the very waterfront style properties. And that paragraph does talk about this issue. It says compensatory storage, parentheses, excavation, shall be provided based on a volume for volume basis when fill is placed in flood hazard areas landward of the coastal construction control line, including the 2% 500-year flood hazard area, shaded zone X, above the normal high groundwater table elevation and below base flood elevation. It goes on. That only affects a small subcategory properties. So whatever we do now will be the rule for this topic. I don't think we already have something on the books that requires this.
Yeah, I think that's a mistake. I think
All right,
we do.
we'll
I mean, those were the
elaborate.
two
Yeah.
changes we made with the floodplain ordinance. So if there's language in there that, I don't know what you're looking at, but those were the two major changes we made with the freeboarding and the fill. I don't know what you're
We'll,
looking at.
we'll get together after the meeting and make sure that I'm looking at a final draft. I'm looking at the version that we had before the council on February 5th.
I have one question. In the 100-year floodplain, I assume that this is for volume displacement in a flood zone as is normal to have, along rivers or whatever, for volume displacement. In the 500-year floodplain, is this for volume displacement as well, or is this just for runoff, surface runoff?
Well, we have to look at those individually, and see. We do have lots in an X-flood zone that owners have come in, raised them 3 feet, and then now the bordering neighbors are getting the
Right.
runoff. So that's why when they come in, we're looking at each one of those individually and looking at them on a case-by-case basis. We look at them up front with the building department when we first get those, and then if we have any concerns, we'll get with the owner. But we're looking at them individually on a case-by-case basis.
Could there, and I'm just throwing out ideas, could there be an option if you're outside the floodplain and your volume displacement in a floodplain does not affect the overall water level in a flood event, to allow more fill if they account for their pre-post drainage or off-site runoff rate?
Mhm.
So if they,
They're
at
not
that
on the
minimum fill, if they say they are the lowest lot, and they say, all right, I gotta raise my lot up 3 feet, which doesn't meet that rule right now, to be with everybody else, but I'm gonna put a swell and some sort of weir, some sort of something, structure in my yard and run this 24-year storm event to control the rate of my runoff to make sure the post-construction's less or equal to pre-construction. Is that possible to have some sort of, outside of the floodplain, have a option for that?
Yeah, and we're working with individual owners as we get those. The idea is not to stop owners from developing their property, making it look nice, doing what they wanna do. The idea is just to make sure that the bordering neighbors are protected and that the city has a plan for handling and
Right.
managing that stormwater.
Okay.
You know, when I lived in Clearwater, we had to get a permit to cut a dead tree. Didn't charge us anything, but the guy came out and, yep, that's a dead tree. And I'm gonna cut it. And then the reason he came out was to okay that, and then to look at my trees and see how many trees I had on my lot. Well, I had enough trees on my lot that was fine. I didn't have to replace this dead tree. If I had not had enough trees on my lot and I was cutting into that number, then I had to replace the tree. And then they charged me a permit then to come back and check the tree after I planted.
Did you replace with a dead tree?
Did I what?
Replace with another dead tree?
Nobody got fined. No, I didn't. No, it was fine because, but that's what I'm talking about. They didn't charge me initially. They were communicating with me to make sure I was knowing what to do and what the city. Now, a neighbor down 2 blocks away cut a tree, didn't get a permit, he got a $500 fine. He didn't cut any more trees without getting a permit. Okay, I'm shutting up.
Next.
The next one is a commercial development order. All commercial development orders have to come before the council. This is for the ice house, the ice machine that used to be at Tommy T's. And city staff recommends approval of it. We have no issues. But we just need your approval.
Do I have to vote on that?
Yeah. We did. Motion to approve.
You made a motion to approve, I second that.
Well, here I go again. Why we charge him $175 to do that? Because that's on the books. Well, that's what I'm talking about. Well, we put something back, just storm took it away, charged the guy $175. Well, I wish we would have a better way of dealing with the circumstances we find ourselves in.
I mean, every commercial, and this one is unique because it's basically an ice machine. But every residential owner who rebuilds, every commercial owner who rebuilds, they're gonna pay a development order because those plans have to be approved, they have to be.
I said because of what it is.
Yeah, the ice house.
Because of what it is,
I agree.
an ice house.
I agree.
Well, if we'd have known that, or somebody, if we had found out, I would certainly not have supported charging that guy $175. Motion second on the floor. Any comments from anybody? Call the roll.
Mr. McLaughlin. Yep. Mayor Kathy.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
Yes.
Mr. Putnam.
Yes.
All right, where are we?
I just have one more question. We've got a couple more commercial development orders that are underway. Well, I think we have a commercial and then we have maybe one, a canal development order. I just wanna make sure you guys are okay that we stick those in the special meeting that's coming up. Is it the 18th? You guys are okay with that instead of making folks wait? They're not quite ready, but we're gonna be seeing those. Any opposition to putting those?
Putting them in what, on
the special meeting
on the
agenda, so
18th?
the owners aren't.
No, I don't have any.
Okay, so we may have some more for you then.
What about the fees for stuff like this? Don't we have a way to just look at that and decide if that's appropriate? Or are we just so focused on that that's what the book says that? I mean, it just bothers me that we don't have the ability to change that.
I know a few months ago, you guys, that we talked about giving the city administrator the authority to waive certain fees, but we didn't get into development orders. I'm comfortable with refunding this $175.
Amen. I think we should. There's no, I mean, that's just,
It's an ice machine.
that's just an ice machine. You know, that's not a, you're not hooking the toilet up or asking, I mean, that's just, I would hope that we would do that without getting into a long drawn out discussion.
I mean, we do, the building department, we do have costs, so they're gonna bill us costs associated with the review of that. There was a lot of work on this when they had to put in flood vents, but it is just an ice machine, so whatever you guys want.
So we take a motion to,
Well, is there any opposition to giving the guy his money back? Anybody have a problem with that?
I know,
Is that, okay. All right, moving on.
the best form of government is a benevolent dictatorship.
All right, task order.
The next one, Dina, Dewberry task orders.
This is a task order, you all had approved the task order for general engineering services related to Hurricane Michael. Based on our hourly rates, it's not project specific, it's just to allow us to work on miscellaneous items that come out related to Hurricane Michael recovery. If you remember, we had one previously that was kind of the emergency period, up to 50,000. We did not bill you for the full 50,000. Then we won your RFP, executed a new master services contract, and so now we're working under that new one, but we're getting close to our not to exceed, so we're requesting an additional not to exceed amount, raising that not to exceed to allow us to keep working on the general Hurricane Michael recovery. But using those previously approved hourly rates.
Okay. Are we doing both at one time?
Oh, I can do that, yeah.
I mean,
So that was the first one.
does the
Or do
council
they
have
have
it, you
to
wanna
vote
do them separately, or is there?
I think typically Nick has us do them separately.
Typically, yes, and the second one is project specific, so
Right.
it's a different.
All right. Is there a motion? On the task order for general, excuse me, professional service, general engineering, this is A.
All motion is on the table.
All right, we have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
All right, discussion? Any discussion? It's pretty clear cut what they're doing. Comments? Okay, call the roll.
Mr. McLaughlin?
Yes.
Mayor Kathy?
Yes.
Mr. Wallace?
Yes.
Mr. Putnam?
Yes.
All right, please proceed.
So the second task order is for, permitting, well, it's our damage analysis of the marina, as well as coordination with FEMA. They'll be doing that site inspection. We are documenting all the damage to help provide that to FEMA so that it's documented. We're also talking about potential mitigation, so improvements, then preparing our plans and specifications to put that out for bid. And then any permit, modifications or, exemptions that are required to do that project. And then the bulk of it will be, construction engineering inspection. So we'll be doing an inspection during construction to ensure that they build it to our plans and specs.
Could you give a just, may just be for me, a brief, sort of, not an explanation, but just an overview of what is wrong down there?
We're missing a lot of pilings. And we think the seawall itself is in pretty good shape. It looks like there's only one place where the dredge pipe goes through it that we may need to look at. We have talked about, Philip actually suggested this, and it's a good idea. Previously, that seawall had epoxy coating, which protected it as far as cathodic protection. But now that it's been impacted and there's probably areas below the water line that we can't see, it could rust. So part of what we would be doing is also coming back with some sort of cathodic protection to keep the wall from deteriorating.
Are you talking about the metal wall?
The metal, yeah.
Metal sheets?
Mhm. And then the big bulk of it though is obviously the dock pedestals, but the utilities feeding those. We think that in most places, the damage will just be pulling the new wire through the conduit. There are a few locations where we will have to probably tear up sidewalk and replace the conduit. We've also looked at the smaller retaining wall. It looks like in most places it's okay. There may be a few places where we need to go back and patch that. Definitely down South Parkway, a lot of the parking, the wall stood up well, but behind the wall where the water was able to get over the wall and eat out the dirt, the parking and the road have collapsed. So we'll need to go back and repave it and put that back in place. And then add some backfill behind it. But this scope would also include extending the seawall to replace the wooden wall that is over by the bridge that we talked about even before the storm. So that would be some mitigation. That wall is damaged, we need to replace it, we may as well take our nice seawall around there. And then putting in some armoring in that area because Philip has a maintenance issue there with how steep it is and mowing, so one thing we're looking at is articulated block and armoring in that area, and it would just be a solid face. We wouldn't have to mow it after we're done. So, I think that's the bulk of it. Can you think of anything else?
Is that something that FEMA, I'm just curious how they have looked at that
So we haven't,
project, because there's some upgrades there.
Yeah. We have not
I
had,
hope we do them. I hope so much we do those.
we haven't had our FEMA inspection. It's scheduled, I think, for next week.
Next week?
We've given them a scope, so now we'll have to talk to them about that inspection, but I expect with, kind of similar to Salt Creek, we are going after the 428, so there is the aspect of mitigation. So provided that we can explain why it's needed, it should be approved. They should approve that and allow us to do the mitigation and the upgrades.
Have they had, you said they hadn't looked at it, but are we concerned that they may think that wood wall is okay?
I don't think so. They signed off on the wooden wall at Salt Creek. They acknowledged that one was needed to be replaced. So far, we don't have
If
any.
we're gonna do all this, and if we don't fix that wood wall, I think we're gonna be pumping behind us all the time. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's
Good.
the beauty of the 428 is they approve it up front, so we know
Yeah.
up front
Yeah, that's good.
what we have.
All right, and when are we meeting with them, or when are they looking at that?
Their inspection is next week,
Yeah.
but we're proceeding with our work in the meantime, so.
All right, we have task order B, which is marina repairs. Again, that's in front of us, and we've had to, so we can, not a more important, in my opinion, a more important asset the city has than to get that thing right. So, do I have a motion?
Have a motion to approve task order B for marina repairs.
All right, second?
Second.
All right. Any opposition? Any discussion from anyone?
No.
Okay? Let the record reflect votes for it.
Should be,
All right, Salt Creek.
The award for Salt Creek. We had one, let me see, I'm gonna put it on there, not ordered.
We had one bid for Salt Creek,
Y'all excuse me, just continue on. I gotta get some more.
HDM.
RBM contract, I don't see it in here.
Are we on contract?
I don't have it in fact.
Oh, it's on the very back, sorry. That's the back of them.
There we go. Okay, we only had one bidder on Salt Creek. And I think it's safe to say that our aggressive timelines sometimes discourage bidders because we're trying to get things done so quickly. And so we may see fewer bids than normal because we're giving them an aggressive timeline. A lot of contractors don't wanna take on that risk, so. We had one, the RBM contracting on Salt Creek. We talked about putting it out for bid again, but that's just gonna delay that project even more. We feel the price is fair, based on the damage assessment. So, we're presenting the one for, go ahead, jump in.
Yeah, I did wanna point out, we had an alternate, a bid alternate option on this one, because, so the base bid includes all of the improvements, and where the crossing is, it would be, guardrail on either side. But we went ahead and put in a bid alternate to, instead of using guardrail, put in, curbing on the sides. Because of the improvements, it's not gonna be as steep and as large of a drop on either side as it was previously. So the curb should be more aesthetically pleasing and still provide the safety aspect. So the council needs to decide, are we awarding the base bid or are we doing the base bid with alternate, essentially? And actually, alternate one was, it was cheaper to do base bid with the curb.
It's with the.
I'm sorry, are we on Salt Creek?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't know if y'all left me or not. All right. Well, I saw the bid, and I talked to Dean about it, I don't know where we are with the discussion, I'm sorry,
We
but blew
just,
my mind.
we just started discussing it.
Are we discussing maybe combining it, or combining with other things, or are we discussing just
Awarding.
letting the chips fall where they are and move on?
We had just,
Awarding it
yeah.
as a single project.
We,
Awarded as a single project?
we talked about it at length, but it's just gonna delay it even more, and that bridge is holding up a lot of work.
And I think we'll need the bridge to be back in place to be able to do the improvements to the marina, like the extension of the road, putting the parking back. They're gonna have to be able to get there with their equipment, so,
I would move we accept the bid.
We got a resident on the other side who's waiting,
that too, yeah.
waiting for us to get that bridge in to rebuild. And 3 other property owners that are also waiting on us on the other side of that bridge.
I asked her, she told me that FEMA didn't flinch at that. Is that maybe a true statement? Well, I don't want to speak for you, I thought of that after I said it.
I feel like you never get the final word from FEMA. We did our site inspection, we talked about all of the improvements. My understanding is, if FEMA receives signed seal drawings that say, this is what's required to bring it up to code, this is what we're recommending, that under 428, they should approve that.
Even with one bid.
Yes, with one bid, we
One
did
bid?
confirm, because it was competitive, yes, it should be okay.
Okay? The only thing, and I call myself looking, and I'm sure it's in here, because it's always in here. What is the time schedule for this outfit? How long they have to do this?
4 months.
I think it is
4
4
months.
I think it was 4 months.
Hold on.
Just be cool, please.
After too many
I
days,
think,
I guess.
I think it's 3 months for substantial completion and 4 months for final.
Really? The lead time for the span is the biggest hold up.
You mean to get it built?
To get the span in here set in place, it's 6 to 8 weeks, I think is what it was.
Yeah.
The biggest delay is getting the span. August first is our target.
Now, there is in the plans a temporary road being put in for people to get to the other side.
Well, when we say people, because safety, it would be
Person,
property owner.
yeah, property owners, not, yes,
Not-
not.
Going west across Salt Creek, that's gonna fill it? Or
Just-
put that pipe in there?
Temporary.
That's-
Temporary.
Yeah, temporarily for the property owners to get to their side.
And for the contractor.
Yeah.
And for the fishermen.
The doggone
And for the dog walk. That's right, good, Rex, that's good.
workers.
Okay. I mean,
Can't wait to go.
I was shocked we don't get one bid, but that's here or there, that's, I think Jerry made a motion prematurely, but we'll accept it.
Thanks.
Did we get a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Keep thinning out, and you've done many over, warm out, didn't we? All right, any opposition? Let the record reflect votes 4-0.
Mayor, you missed this, the comment that I made when you stepped out, but the feedback we're getting from contractors is our aggressive timelines. That's really what's preventing us from getting very many bids. But we feel like we still need to stay on track with those aggressive timelines.
And actually, I looked it up, we have 90 days on that one for final completion.
90 days.
90 days, yes.
Well, that's better than August 1st.
But
But-
it's still got
I would like to hear from the contractor what he's anticipating as far as manufacturing of those steel sheets and the prefab structure. So, but that is how we did it.
We put steel sheets on the west side, or we just put the curtain? What I call curtain.
So the side that runs back towards the goal.
West, headed toward Panama on the back side of this bridge, man.
kind of a small one.
Yes, where we had the old wooden seawall that was at the parking lot, that will be replaced with steel.
Okay.
And then on the canal side,
Yeah.
we're gonna extend our seawall to the wing walls of the new structure. So there will be a portion of new seawall there.
Just go and return.
Yeah, it'll tie into the, yeah.
Better than ever, huh?
Okay. All right, well, I mean, it is what it is, we just can't make people. That will create a problem, steel sheets on that time frame, I guarantee you.
But we could do part of it. We could
Yeah.
get a lot of it done.
Back to marina repairs, you probably told me, and I didn't hear it. What is our projected bid date for that?
And,
Wasn't that on your screen?
I think it's
Kay?
next week.
Yes, I think it's next week too, just a minute, maybe.
To bid it?
No, sorry,
To advertise.
Yeah, the
the
advertising,
slips, May seventh.
also.
We
That's
wanna
to
award
award
it,
Yeah.
award it by May seventh, so it'll be going out for bid very soon.
Next week to
And
put
we're
it out.
sticking with our 14 days? What are we doing
On
on
that
that?
one,
I think we should
I
still
think
be
so on
14.
that one. But the contract time, I mean, it could be a lot of work, so I think the contract time, we stick with what we had.
Yeah, we have, awarded by 5/7, completion by 9/1.
Excuse me. Okay. All right, where are we?
Okay, the next one, the next bid we're asking you to award is the water plant, including the Public Works building repairs. We have one bid, that's Marshall Brothers, they built the original building, so it's their work, and they bid on it. Now, we did submit this also to our insurance company.
Did they have anything to say?
That's one of them I'm fighting on right now.
Yeah, Adrian's working on that, but we did submit this, because we do have insurance on that building, so we did submit that. But this will take care of both the water plant, electrical components, and the public works building repairs. And it is one bid, but it is the original general contractor.
They're awesome.
It does to some
I'm
degree,
shocked, nobody.
Generators.
and watertight cabinets.
Yeah, there is some mitigation in there, Mayor,
I
I don't know
know.
if you heard that.
Has nothing to do with the ground storage tank.
No.
Correct.
That's separate.
We've done that already.
Do I was gonna say, I
That's
can't
not-
keep it up. We need a list of what we have.
Yeah.
Okay. Again, one bid that they're okay with that? I mean,
It
the
actually,
reimbursement people is what I'm,
Right.
yes,
Most of that should come from
This one
insurance
should be
proceeds.
insurance.
Okay.
But anything that's not, we'll be submitting it under 428.
Philip, I'm curious, the electrical or the water that we got in some of the panel, has that caused us issues?
Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Are we bypassing?
We're replacing components as needed. If we don't need it, yes, we have bypassed a few things. We've had to replace the big transformer in there.
Okay.
I can't remember how expensive that was, but yes, sir, we have had issues. As frequent as last week.
I didn't know, I knew we still had water, or I do at my house, so I didn't know,
Okay.
you know,
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I got you. Okay, motion? Come on, Jerry, don't let us down now.
I move we accept the bid.
I have a motion and a second. I think it should reflect that it's Marshall Brothers, just for the, all right, motion and a second. Bill, did you second?
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Any opposition? Any comment before we move on? Let the record reflect that's 4-0.
Okay. The next one is the MX, the master lift station.
can I ask a question? On that first one, did we do base bid with alternate one?
Yes,
We did.
that's
Okay.
what I wrote, but
Okay, is that what?
Yeah, the alternate one was the lower price.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay.
Sure, we get we're wrong, all right, 7, Okay, the next on MX1, let's do this.
Yeah, the next one is MX1. We have 4 bids on MX1.
4 bids, wow.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Longer contract time,
Huh?
Exactly.
longer contract time.
Oh, longer contract time to get 4 bids.
So, the recommendation is L&R Contracting. That was the lowest bid. You guys have anything you want to add on that, L&R?
How much did the bids vary?
They're on,
They were those 4 were pretty close with the exception of one.
they range from the lowest at 949,000
One more,
and the
Jerry.
highest at 1.5 million.
No.
So this one's just under.
What's our familiarity with Eleanor?
With Eleanor, they actually,
they're
I
doing the
think,
bores on East Street.
I'm familiar with them, and I think, yeah, they are doing the boards on 8th Street. I think they originally did work on the master lift station, is that right?
That I don't know. I
That's
wasn't
what they
here.
told us.
I was still in school.
I don't know.
No offense.
County.
Yeah, no offense.
You're welcome.
I was still in school in '99.
Do you remember them, Mary?
That would've been Bay County.
But we have worked with them, me,
Do I
the last
remember
13
what?
years.
The master, them ever working on the master lift station? No.
No. Unless the county sent them out here.
Yeah.
They have worked on the master lift station for that. I don't know if they helped. I don't know if they built it or helped build it or anything like that. But we've used them on the water side. We've used them on the wastewater side, and we work well with them. They're a good company. I was happy they got it.
Okay, now that's a rebuild of the building too. I mean, that's truly,
New generator, reset the building,
Yeah.
elevate the building, elevate the generator,
Sealing the wet well,
sealing the wet well, yes, sir.
and then a new pump, 2 new pumps,
It-
so that we have backup in
That's
case one goes down.
New fence, new
Yeah.
everything.
500.
We do have $500,000 insurance proceeds on this, and the rest will be pushing through 428.
okay? Staff recommendation, Eleanor, do I have a motion?
Motion to accept.
L&R contract.
Eleanor, yeah.
Second.
Second. Again, comments? Opposition on the table? None? Let the record reflect, 4-0, moving on.
Everybody take your
We can
packet,
spend some money, can't we?
everybody take your packet, flip it over. That's where you are. Last page,
Yeah, I know.
meeting location.
package, flip it over.
Yeah, then you
Back
back.
in the hell.
Yeah, very back.
All right, meeting locations. We have 4 potential locations. All 4 of them have issues, all 4 of them don't have issues. Moving out of this room, we identified the Baptist Church. The request from the Baptist Church is that an officer is present at all the meetings in case someone needs to get out there, needs to be escorted from the building since it's a place of worship. We have to open every meeting with a prayer by Pastor Eddie or his designee. They do not want to charge, and we have to bring our own tables and chairs. They don't have any there. Number 2, we put the Mango Marley's tent. They do have tables and chairs. It would be outside, possible traffic due to lunchtime, noise from the traffic, and we're concerned about having the technology hookups like we have here, but possibly to find one. The Casuna Clubhouse, table and chairs are there, but their roof is not repaired. They're 4 to 6 weeks out on their roof repair, and they may charge a minimal rental fee. They had not decided yet, but do not want us to use it until the roof is done since there is insulation still falling in the room. And the 4th option was the Public Works Building. They do have the tables and chairs, but we just awarded the bid to start the work in the building. So, what do we want to do? Where do we want to go?
How will the work in the building, how bad would it affect us? In other words, can we work around the work and can the work around us?
I mean, we're moving out,
There's your answer.
because I mean, they're pulling everything out, it'll be insulated.
Where are you going?
I know that you're gonna laugh at this, but I am, my guys have decided they don't wanna do it, but I'm gonna pull the fish cooler over next to the building, I'm gonna move in there.
The what?
Fish cooler.
Well, don't do that, we could meet in there.
Yeah, Jerry wouldn't have to have the temperature lowered.
Add an option 5, fish cooler.
It's perfectly fine, doesn't even stink, believe it or not.
I say we stay where we are.
I personally really like option 3. I just wish that roof was done, so we can move on it now.
I'd agree with that. I mean,
4 to 6 weeks is only, what, 3 more meetings?
Yeah, let's stay
Give or
here.
take. We have long meetings, we wear everybody out, they don't wear
that's gonna be the meeting next time.
I think the important thing is that we at least find a place for the citizens, whether we have to wait for weeks or whatever, they know it's coming. I think that's important.
I'm all for Casuna.
Yeah.
Me too.
Personally, I mean, I can't see adjusting, if we had some, I know it'd be hard to do, if we just get a few folding chairs or something, give these folks a chance to, even if they had to swap out.
Take turns.
Yeah, take turns or something, but maybe we could look at that, because that is a concern.
Yeah, you've got good parking, you've got good chair space, you've
You got
got
air conditioning.
restrooms, you've got air, you've got.
It's ADA compliant, it's a good
No, I
location.
think we got it, that's.
Yeah, I'm all for waiting for Casuna.
Okay, it's not fast, but, it's not quick, but it's a
No.
solution.
Well,
That's okay.
But in the grand scheme of things, it is quick, right?
All right.
Yeah, but if we could, let's look, I mean, a few chairs, that we could try to help some of these folks, and, I mean, it would be, that's really my biggest complaint.
We could rent chairs.
We could bring our own.
I'll see what we salvaged, I think we were salvaged some chairs out there, I'll see what we got.
Just some folding chairs, I know it'll be cramped, but it might help a few people. Okay, so
I'll put the pressure on it.
Put the pressure on.
Yep.
all right, do you have a department report, Amy?
Yeah,
I have an election, I can give you that report. This room will be taken over Friday afternoon. It'll reopen Wednesday afternoon. The election will be held in here Tuesday. It is the smallest polling place the supervisor of elections office has ever used, so it's gonna be busy. I pretty much say try to avoid City Hall next Tuesday. It's gonna be a little tight in the building, but. So next Tuesday from 7 to 7 in this room.
Do we need to move this table up?
They will be more than likely flipping it upside down in the corner, and stuff will be in hallways.
All right,
I don't have any formal reports, we pretty much covered ours, I didn't know if the chief had anything.
just an update. All right, bring it on.
All right, up until date, we've had 320 calls for service for the last month into present. We conducted 110 building checks, we did 51 traffic stops. Of the traffic stops, it resulted into 19 arrests. And we had 2 burglary calls on one of the traffic stops. The items that were stolen from the residents were located, so all the items were returned back. So the guy was pretty excited about that. We had 21 suspicious vehicle calls to which we made contact with, also resulting in numerous arrests, most of them for simple possession or warrants from other agencies outside the state. Other than that, that's all we have to report.
I've got an update.
All right, bring it on.
We just issued a boil water notice for North 35th Street.
North 35th?
North 35th, yes, sir.
Just issued?
Just issued, not 5 seconds ago.
Is it the cast iron? What is it?
No, the 35th Street's tied into the old 6-iron cast, and we finally figured out how it's still being fed. But the guy shut it off the other day, not knowing that 35th was tied into it. Well, we just realized it was, so now we got to issue a water notice. Yeah, it's a mess.
But no other street?
Just 35th, North 35th.
How do they know?
Hmm?
How quick will these people know?
As soon as they, the boil water notice,
Yeah,
we're doing door hangers, we're going door to door, knocking on doors,
Okay.
talking to whoever's there, putting door hangers up.
that's good. That's
So we
good.
put it on the city website, well, put it on the Facebook page. So,
Did you have anything? All right, miscellaneous,
A
moving
couple
on.
things, you wanna give them an update on Veterans Park, extending our sewer service to Veterans Park?
no. Only because we
Good
don't
for
have
you.
official words yet from Gulf County, so I don't want to,
On the Veterans Park?
you said extending the service.
To Veterans Park, the
Well,
FEMA mobile home park.
We've let them tie into the 4-inch force main that runs up to the old Jerry Care Center.
Mhm.
Well, let's just jump right in, shall we?
I thought you said no.
I did. We have been approached, and I think y'all might remember this, by at least one resident further down 98 going back towards St. Joe, requesting to be tied into Mexico Beach's sewer. Well, the main doesn't run that far, so in order to get them sewer, there has to be, the main has to be extended. So I've reached out to Gulf County, asking for their help and getting the main extended down to what I call Gulf Air Beach. I don't know if there's another name for it, but, we don't have official word yet on whether they will or won't. But as soon as they do, I'll be happy to let the council know.
I think that's gonna be up for vote, the county commission.
He said, Mr. Warren said he was gonna take it before the commission and get back with me and let me know what they decide.
Those are the additional individual homes that's, septics were washed out during the storm and we, you guys
DEP
agreed
won't
to.
let them put it in, DEP won't allow them to replace the septic tank, so basically the only other option they have is tying into Mexico Beach's system.
You know, they didn't make them tie in down there, that was optional. Gulf County on the sewer side. You know, when they ran sewer down there, they wasn't mandatory.
They've got St. Joe,
For
St. Joe Beach.
for their sewer system.
well, they don't have a sewer system.
They have to a certain point, don't they?
Yeah, yeah, they do, they got all them grinding pumps down there that are, thank goodness we didn't do that.
On that side of Gulf Air.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're on this side of Gulf Air, where they don't have sewer yet.
They don't have a driver's system, yeah.
So what is Gulf County trying to decide? If they're gonna pay to extend the line, our line?
Yes. 'Cause, I mean, those residents have no other option. Gulf County can't take care of them, so.
So we just, when the Gulf County gets there, they'll
Yeah.
wire line.
They
it.
do it with their equipment,
It's
with it.
about 2,000 feet of line.
That's gotta be at least $2,000.
So we'll know something on that soon, but
Well, does that have to be, I'm just thinking out loud, does that have to be a force main?
Yes.
It's not a gravity line. All right,
okay.
I don't look for a quick answer. All right, go ahead.
Okay, miscellaneous, special meeting to award the bids, don't forget it's April
Is it
18th.
one or two?
Is it, I think
I think
it's
it's
at
at
2.
two, I think this is wrong,
To
Should
award
be 2
it?
PM.
2 o'clock.
There's one.
Your
I think it's
documents
2
say
o'clock.
a particular time, if so, it'd be better to.
Let me check.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's,
That's why,
Yeah.
I, for some reason, think it's 2, and I think I hit 1.
Okay.
while Dean is verifying it, I'll go on to the next one. Harbor Master, our harbor master resigned. So we're looking for a new harbor master. I have one name, that I was given yesterday I need to reach out to, so if anyone's interested in our harbor master position, please reach out to me. We'd like to have that person in place as soon as. we're
I
ready
think
to-
we need something that, who's answering that phone? Or is it probably no one?
I don't know where it's at.
I get phone calls on the slips, so they're getting to us.
Well, you can't get a better one than the applicant that we have speaking, just because I've known him for.
That one hasn't applied yet. There was a different one that came in yesterday. I'm expecting that one too, I'm expecting that too.
Of the letter I gave? I put on your
On your
desk?
desk, I have that sitting on my desk,
And then you have another one I had.
and he gave me another one.
Sorry, I'm talking, there's 2 of them.
I had a lot of stuff left on my desk this week, so.
Okay, but you did see that?
I did.
Okay, that's all,
Yes.
okay. All right, so how are we gonna deal with that before we leave it? Are we going to make it, I mean, are we gonna, I think it would be good to have somebody in place, even though they can't read any slips, to answer that phone and try to do maybe a little PR for us, talk to people, let them know what we're trying to do.
We can do that, we'll have, they're under contract, so we'll have to figure out how you guys wanna do that. So what I was gonna do is bring back the information on the individuals and let you guys.
Next
We can
meeting?
do it next meeting.
Okay. Fantastic, okay,
All right.
good.
And then I had just one other thing, Lance, you always bring me the interesting ones. Commercial development. So we were looking in the LDR, let me find my page, for setbacks. So for rear setbacks on all residential, it's only 10, but for general commercial, it's 20 on a rear setback. Didn't really seem to make sense. We corrected a corner recently, if you guys remember, that had 20, no rhyme or reason, we changed it to 10 to match. But it doesn't really make sense to me that a commercial lot can have no setbacks on the side, 12 in the front, 12 on a corner, but 20 in the back. So I just wanted to present that to you guys and see if you're.
Buffer if there's residential line?
No, there's language, if they abut residential, it requires 5 feet from the building to the adjacent property line, and, I think there's some other,
There's no rhyme or
buffers and
reason
things.
then.
Couldn't find one.
Any
And it's-
fire code for that?
It's been 10 feet on fire code. It's been this way for a while, but we haven't had a true commercial development order in a very long time. So I just kinda wanted to get your thoughts on that, if it's something you want us to, I don't think we have to go to P and Z for this one, this is just a minor change. If you want us to have something ready for the next meeting, or if you guys think the 20-foot rear setback is,
Doesn't make any sense to me.
Well, that certainly is a meaningful change, if it's changed to a commercial property.
Was there any, you've been around longer than anyone.
It's been there since 1991.
Yeah, was there any reason you think of when you got put in?
But it has been I mean, it caused some, when you, on commercial lots, you have to not only have your parking, your stormwater, you have to do, I mean, I don't know that it's gonna make a significant difference personally, because you can't hardly get all of you have to do on a 75, 100 lot unless you're gonna put a Caribbean cafe or a, or something small. But I think it would be good to look at that and offer a recommendation, I really do.
okay. We'll put it on the next agenda? Okay.
That's why it's 12 too in the front,
Yes,
instead of 10.
yes.
Yeah.
It's 12 in the front,
Anyway,
yeah, it didn't really make sense next
Yeah.
agenda?
That's right.
I would just recommend that kind of change would be fine, but it could be significant to certain people. I don't know why we would forego the normal process of sending it to the P and Z board first. That's what we do with changes to our land development code.
Can we look at it and then send it to them?
Well, why not? Let them look at it first and send it to us. That's what they're there for.
Yeah, I'm looking at the paragraph from the land development code right now. I don't see anything that would be exceptions or reasons not to. The regular process would be for them to look.
Is there
at it
anything
first.
coming in front of us that might be affected by that, by?
Yes.
Hmm.
We have commercial development orders starting to come in.
But no individual brought this up, or, oh, they did?
Who we're looking at.
Smiley over here.
All eyes on me.
And I just,
And he's laughing too.
and, I mean,
So we wouldn't be able to look at it until next month, then if it goes back to PNC.
Thanks, Steve. All right.
Be on the agenda.
Personally, for me, I think it's fun sometimes not do it the same way every time. I think we all just decide ourselves. Sorry.
you may-
I don't really care. I don't. The attorney recommends that we do it. When do they meet?
They meet the 6th of May, we meet the 14th of May.
It's over a month away.
Hmm.
Is it critical enough to the development orders coming in front of us that we wouldn't want to accelerate it in any way?
Well, I think we're interested in getting as much done as quick as possible for the city. So if we're putting this off for a month, and so I said that's what P and Z is there for. But this is different times, you know.
I guess what I was saying, is there a reason that we would need to ask P and Z to meet on a special meeting to do this?
We could do that. We could do a special meeting and get their recommendation.
That way we could look at it at the next real meeting.
Mhm.
of the board.
So it's just 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's-
Direction to the administrator. We're all around it, that's everybody nailed it.
Special meeting for
Yeah.
P and Z,
That way we can do next.
okay, and then we'll put it on the agenda for your next meeting for possibly a first reading, depending on how it goes in P and Z.
You good?
I'm good.
Election.
All right.
Yeah.
I'm good with all that.
Yeah.
No.
Next meeting's on there.
Right, I'm doing P and Z.
Yeah, we're doing all that.
What are we doing now?
Okay, all right,
I don't know.
we've got our marching orders.
It doesn't
All right,
matter.
well,
can
we
discuss
got-
it. It's open to the word amendment.
The 10 feet we want to go to?
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, I don't know what they're gonna recommend. I mean, residential's 20 in the front, 10 in the rear, commercial's 12 in the front, 20 in the back. I don't know that there's any rhyme or reason to that. I've never heard of it. I mean, from just years past, I don't.
Well, what I would normally do is put an ordinance in front of the planning and zoning board for their review and comment. So is there a thought on what you think the rear setback should be, if it's not 20?
From a commercial owner, is there anything that you would recommend?
Bad
I have a
guess.
comment. I just wanna say that basically, at 10 feet will allow a lot of the other commercial businesses to go back within that same footprint. 20 will not. 1402, Highway 98, for example.
Right.
Whole Foods, probably, for example. I mean, you tell them 20.
I think 10 is a good recommendation.
I don't see where 10's residential. I don't see I don't see any real harm in being 10.
We'll go through, because we just talked about this morning, but we'll go through the, land development regulations and make sure the buffers are still there and everything, that there's nothing that we're missing. We typically don't put an ordinance before P and Z, we just put the change, and then we put the ordinance before the council, we just discuss the change.
That's
Is
fine.
that okay?
It's just better to give them something.
Yeah, to give them
Concrete
typically
instead of,
we
a lot of
modify,
issue.
yeah, typically we modify the LDR and put that before them. Is that okay? We don't usually put an ordinance.
It'll be, either way is
Either
fine.
way,
This is
okay.
a very straightforward change. We'll
Okay,
understand
just
it.
wanna, didn't wanna put you under the gun with having to do that. We can pull this meeting together quickly.
That's a 2-page ordinance.
Okay, alright,
I can do that under the gun.
okay, thank you.
Tomorrow I
We
do
do a
it.
lot under the gun, thank you.
Tomorrow.
Okay, alright, we'll schedule that. That's all I
Other
have.
miscellaneous?
That's all I have.
Anyone? Last call, comment? Yeah, what you got?
Tanya, a question I guess goes to everybody here. I talked to the code lady before I came in here. I know she said she started on Canal Street, she's up to 38th or whatever. Is there any thought of giving her help to get something done quicker? You know, Mexico Beach is a big site, especially the other side. Probably 95% of everybody lives this side of 98. And all these empty lots, I haven't seen but one lot, anybody ever show up to even clean anything in 6 months. And there are all these empty lots everywhere, it's gonna take forever. All that trash is gonna be in our face, I bet you a year from now, it's gonna look just like it does. Somebody's gotta start getting these people letters now to say you got X amount of time to clean it up. Because they're not showing up, they're not doing anything.
Well, you may have missed what I said in the beginning. So far, up to 34th Street is where she is, which is, she made a lot of progress in 1 week.
She was talking about more houses, not the empty lots. She said that's like the low priority.
Right. And so up to that point, we identified 25 properties that needed either demolition or debris removal. Of those 25, 23 are already on the list. They have already submitted their right of entry for demolition and debris removal through FEMA Public Assistance. So 2 out of all of those. So I understand what you're saying, but people are trying, and people have submitted it, and
But they
they're
can't for
wanting their
empty
lots.
lots. I'm talking about the empty lots. They can't do that for empty lots.
Debris removal for empty lots.
I tried that. Last meeting I was here, that you were here, we sent, personally, to the 4 lots across from me, we sent them people, them forms. They filled them out, they sent them here. You actually looked into it, said you didn't have anything here for them. And they were told, FEMA came out, started cleaning the lots up, and FEMA left, they never came back again.
Yeah, I
And we
think
submitted
some
them
people
to
get
totals.
FEMA confused with Team Rubicon.
Well, we went 6, 7 lots, and nothing got cleaned up, and now it's done. So all
Well-
these lots that are here now, nobody's gonna clean them up.
Yeah, you can talk to me after the meeting, because I'm not following the 6 lots you're talking about, but we can talk after the meeting. We have a very, very, very long list of people who have already submitted right of entry to allow us to either do demolition or debris removal, and we're working through those.
So we're gonna have grass and weeds growing,
Once the lots are cleared,
yeah, so till the lots are clear.
just like we always have in the past, they're gonna be vacant lots.
with weeds.
And you said that the vacant lots are on low priority?
No, he said that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I heard when you were talking about it.
We're working from west
Yeah, I
end
know.
east.
But I thought you referenced
Yeah,
houses.
we're capturing them all, we're not.
Okay.
We done?
One more.
Go.
That's gonna take long, and I may have missed it, the ordinance on possibly adding the same footprint building in the development order, is that still
Next meeting.
next meeting? Okay.
Month between meetings.
That's the second reading on the setback ordinance, the blanket.
I do have one question. If the property changes hands though, and they haven't already gotten developed more, they can't go back in the same footprint, right?
Yes, it can.
Yes, they can.
They can, a new owner can?
Yeah.
Okay.
Under the current
I still
ordinance.
I was gonna ask about that. I mean, when we do that, you know, we did it, it sounded good. When I think about it now, when we passed, things for, non-conforming, and I think the purpose of it was for the people that lived here. And I just wonder, we have an opportunity to get more conforming buildings, why wouldn't it be best if you lived here, that'd be okay, if the property changes hands, then, you know, why do we give them, why do we do that? It just seems to me, thinking about it after we did it, that it would be best to, if you lived here, to be able to do it. If you sell it, that the new owners have to build conforming buildings.
My comment on that is because we're dealing with a national disaster declaration, and if you're not gonna give, I mean, if we're gonna put so many people out of, in some cases, they'll end up with a lot that's not even built.
But new owners coming in, they should expect it to have to be to code and to conform instead of.
It will be a code, it
In
just,
some areas.
It would be a
Big
code.
side townhouses. Possible.
And units on townhouses are big,
Huh?
that'd be a big problem for.
Yeah, the townhouses, but that's an exception, they already talked about when we're talking about individual lots,
That's
that
what that
people come and,
individual lot.
yeah, come in and then they build the same thing that was
Well,
there.
let's
We're not
take
gonna
Pier
make our
Road,
town
those
change.
are individual lots.
And everyone's still.
They can't conform,
Well, I think, well, okay,
they literally could not conform.
But that's the
if they
exception.
could
I was asking.
conform to, you know, if the lot was big enough they could conform, should they be able to be allowed if it's a new owner?
I think they should, I think that's why we did it, was to give people, I don't, to me, that variance, we'll call it, goes with the land, not with the person. But everything we do,
Is there an
revote.
exception?
I think that's a,
Nick, isn't the law that it goes with the land?
Well, what we drafted is that the right to apply and the development order, once it's granted, would go with the land. There are definitely some risks trying to limit that to only the prior owners. It's just someone will come along inevitably and sue you.
But if there's not a development order in place, if there's not a development order already in place and somebody buys that, then they can still go back to what was there. And
Well, we haven't adopted anything yet. We've only done the first reading, but that's how it's set up. And
That's how it's set up.
the other theory behind it too is, it's what the mayor was alluding to. If you wanna help the people who live here, and they're not gonna be able to rebuild, and they have a lot that without this exception, not much can be built there, well, they've not only lost their building, they basically have a lot that has no value.
I think the question would have been, you know, if the lot's big enough, they could put something on there, it's not necessarily, little ones I agree.
We could.
I don't disagree, I was just curious.
Well, we could do an analysis and adjust what we have. If the lot's a certain size, then it wouldn't apply. We just haven't done that. So,
Can I just jump in and add some for clarification? The setback ordinance, the council decided to just do it blanket, because initially I was having to do those individually, so that's not gonna hold anybody up. We're already approving those if they're going back to the original footprint, you don't have to wait on the ordinance. The ordinance just granted blanket approval, so that we don't have to do those individually before the council.
You good?
Good.
Last call, motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Thank you.
So-